Okay, so I mean that's it's an enormous topic. So
Mm.
uh, um, for some context, so it's important. I'm glad you mentioned what you did because Albert Pike is the one that points out that the work of Freemasonry is to rebuild the Temple of Solomon, right? Because
Mhm.
Freemasonry is based on the idea, uh, the what the Shayatin taught, which is that uh, Solomon practiced magic.
In this episode of Masonic Education, we're going to be discussing the significance of King Solomon's Temple within Freemasonry and how the idea of it is integral to the teachings of our fraternity. Though we can trace the beginning of modern Freemasonry to the formation of the First Grand Lodge of England in 1717, and there is evidence the fraternity evolved from the medieval trade guilds of operative stonemasons hundreds of years before that, we Freemasons tie our allegorical origins and the foundations of our symbolic learning system to the building of King Solomon's Temple about 3,000 years ago. The 3 degrees of the symbolic lodge, the entered apprentice, fellowcraft, and master mason, along with many other degrees throughout the appendant Masonic bodies, are inextricably connected to not only the process of building King Solomon's Temple, but also the metaphorical implications of what that historical structure represents. The Hebrew Bible, or Old Testament, tells us that King Solomon built the temple in Jerusalem based on plans given by God to his father, King David, as a permanent resting place for the Ark of the Covenant, the chest used to carry the 2 tablets of stone on which the 10 Commandments were written and said to have been received by Moses on Mount Sinai. No one really knows what that first temple truly looked like, though there have been calculated guesses based on measurements and descriptions from sacred writings. Archaeological evidence has been hard to come by because the original temple was destroyed by the Babylonians hundreds of years before the Common Era. During the 1,000 years after the temple's destruction, the site saw a number of other sacred buildings built upon it, a site which has become revered by the Jewish, Christian, and Islamic faiths that have in turn controlled the area separately at various times in history, impeding scientific study of earlier construction. Regardless, the story of building this first temple by King Solomon, with the help of his master builder Hiram Abiff and Hiram, king of Tyre, is the origin from which almost all our Masonic rituals and symbolism can be traced. From the apprentices and craftsmen who quarried, prepared, and assembled the stones to build it, to the master masons who drew the designs for them to follow. Our ritual uses the building of King Solomon's Temple allegorically to promote the building of character that is the focus of our teachings. The physical temple itself exemplified what can be accomplished by different people when they work together in harmony. But maybe more importantly, it continues to act as a symbol today of how we as individuals, following the plans of the grand architect of the universe, while using the right tools, diligence, and skill, can build our own temples of character for a better future. So you see, we Freemasons think of King Solomon's Temple as a metaphor for building better lives, better relationships, and a better world.
So this is the idea that was inherited by the Freemasons. As we know that in the Quran, uh, God gave a lot of not magical powers, but he gave Solomon a lot of abilities, and among them was the ability to control some of the jinn, who he used in the construction of the temple. So this is why the whole idea is that uh, this magic was magic that allowed Solomon to control the jinn and to build the temple. So the Freemasons regard themselves as masons because they are building laying the bricks for the new temple of Solomon. So historically, it's important to remember that uh, there were 2 temples. So the first temple is one built by Solomon, and it was destroyed by the Babylonians, which is why the Jews ended up in Babylon when they learned this magic, which they call Kabbalah. And then later in 70 AD is when the second temple was destroyed. And so what happens at this point is that the Jews, so it's from that point on that the Jews are dispersed around the world. So the central theme of Judaism from that point on is to bring the Jews back to Israel and to rebuild the third temple. And that's the basis of Christian Zionism. So there's a famous relief that's I guess it's in Rome, that shows Titus carrying off the treasures of Jerusalem.
Yep.
And there's a famous, there's an example of the large gold menorah that they were carrying away. And so there's various rumors of what happened. And one of the rumors is that Alaric, when he, was it 410, when he conquered the Roman Empire, he also managed to seize hold of the treasure and then brought some of it belonged to the region of southern France. There's a further account which claims that the Byzantine army then conquered the Visigoths, and then under the advice, this is all actually recounted by a Byzantine historian named Procopius, and he says that the Jews advised the emperor to transfer the remaining treasure to Jerusalem. Mm-hmm. So these are not legends; these were widely circulated reports. So what I'm showing in my recent book is that modern European culture begins in the Champagne region of France. There's an excellent book by her last name is Abu Lugod, and it's called Before European Hegemony, and she traces basically the birth of modern capitalism, or however you want to call it, modern European economics, to the Champagne region, because the Champagne region was also the birthplace of the Templar movement. And particularly the city of Troyes in Champagne was the seat of one of the most famous rabbis of medieval times. His name was Rashi. And so Rashi, he was in regular contact with Hugh of Champagne, who was one of the founders of the Templars. He was also the one who basically bequeathed some of his land for the founding of the Cistercian movement that Bernard of Clairvaux belonged to. So what I believe is that the Jews were aware that there was remnants of treasures that they weren't able to save when the Romans destroyed the temple in 70 AD, and they wanted to try to recover them. So because when you look at the families that are involved in the First Crusade, principally what's called the Prince's Crusade, are intricately related. It's a pretty astounding family tree. Supposedly they trace back to, because in those ancient times, the Jews used to be governed by a leader that they called what's called an exilarch, who was the leader of the Jewish community. And so apparently there was a schism when one of the lair leaders split from the main exilarchate and moved to southern France, particularly a region called Septimania, where he became the leader of the Jewish community there. So it's out of this community, so that purportedly his son became known in the Romance literature of the time as William or Guillaume of Boulogne. So you'll find that all of these families can be traced directly back to William of Boulogne, particularly William of Conquer, through his descent to Rollo the Viking, who married, I believe, the daughter or granddaughter of William of Boulogne, and then the Plantagenets, of course, and then the various families of southern France, particularly the Chivacotain and the Counts of Toulouse.